Welcome. This is Matthew David Hurtado, and this is the Allow broadcast where you can master the law of least effort to receive your desires. And today I have a best-selling author who empowers women all over the world, and her name is HeatherAsh Amara. So welcome to the broadcast, HeatherAsh.
Thanks so much, Matthew.
Awesome. Well, I was just looking at your website, and now this is going to be strange because I'm not a female, so you're going to have to kind of work through me and help educate me on some of the things that may be a little bit different from my perspective and the perspective that you empower others with. So I looked at your recent blog post and I was really captivated by it because it talked a lot about what's happening right now. It's very in the now, the trends with a lot of the fear that's going on in our culture. I want to get into that in just a moment, and I want to have a topic about that. But first, I want to just have you give a little bit of background because I know you've done some traveling throughout the world and you've got a lot of knowledge to share. So give us a background about how you became who you are today.
Mm-hmm. The short story is I was raised in Southeast Asia. So as a kid, I traveled all over the world. I was really blessed to get to see many, many different countries. And when I first came to the United States to go to college, it was really a shock because I felt like I was disconnected. I felt the people around me were disconnected, and I didn't understand why. So I got into politics really big for a couple of years and then started looking at different spiritual traditions. And I decided to start my exploration in European shamanism because I figured that's my background. And I was really curious, what did my ancestors, like the people way back, what did they believe in? And that's when I started learning about different earth-based spiritualities and the cycles of nature, and it felt really like coming home. So I studied that for a long time, and then I had a dream about a man, and in this dream, I remember waking up thinking, right, where am I going to meet this really powerful man that's going to change my life? And a week later, someone came into my office and said, oh my God, you have to meet this man. And my whole body went, I'm not ready. And that human was Don Miguel Ruiz, who's the author of The Four Agreements. And I stepped into an apprenticeship with him and studied with him for about 10 years. And I'm now teaching with the Ruiz family. So for the last 20 years, I've been involved in the Toltec work. And the Toltec were a group of people that came together in South and Central Mexico to study perception. And they were really curious about how do we create our reality, which I know is what you are interested in as well.
Yes.
And found that through releasing the old beliefs and the limitations that we have, that we as artists, we're really, the word Toltec means artists of the spirit, that we are artists of our own life. And that by capturing our own attention and really choosing where we put our focus, that we can clear out what doesn't serve us and really be in a place of creativity and joy and exploration in our lives.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what's so synchronistic is I actually had an interview a short while ago with Don Miguel Ruiz Jr.
Oh, nice. My dear friend.
Yeah. So this is great. This is another refreshing course for me and everybody else. So I'm excited about this. So let's talk about creating our reality, and let's talk about the warrior training that you do. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote a book 2 years ago called Warrior Goddess Training, and was written for women, but really it's for everybody. The teachings are the teaching, and I've had a lot of men that have read the book that are like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is exactly what I needed to read. And what's unusual about Warrior Goddess Training is that it's 10 really simple lessons to help women to find their voice, to come back into their power. And as an author, one of the things that you can do is you can call all your friends and say, hey, everybody, buy my book on the same day. And everybody buys your book and you become a bestseller on Amazon for a day, and then you become number 10,342.
Yeah.
What happened with Warrior Goddess Training is it went to #1 in shamanism and goddesses, and it has never come off. So It's been #1 for over 2 years now. And it's because as women, and I believe as humans, we're really ready for change and transformation. And we recognize that there's something missing. That sense of there has to be something else to allow us to get what I think of as free on the inside. So especially for women, 100 years ago, a little bit over 100 years ago, women couldn't vote.
Hmm.
And so just within 100 years that we recently had the opportunity to vote for a possible female president and that we're able to vote at all, there's a lot of freedom we have externally. But really what we're learning is how to get free on the inside. And this is true for all of us, because there's ways that we have locked ourselves in a jail of our limiting perceptions and beliefs. And so I am really passionate about helping everybody to have an inner revolution so that we begin to become aware of how we're limiting ourselves, take back our own power, our own responsibility, and learn how to undo those beliefs so that we can choose where we want to put our attention.
Exactly. Well, taking our power back is what I'm most excited about extracting from you in the best way possible in the short time that we have. So step one, let's say I'm a man, but I'm going to come to your material and I'm interested in taking my power back. Step one, where do I start? How do I do this?
Yeah, good question. Committing to yourself.
Okay.
So number one is around finding your commitment, that energy, and I think of this as warrior energy, which says I'm in 100% and I will learn to be in relationship with the being that I am now, rather than who I think I'm supposed to be or who I've been in the past. And so for many of us, men and women, we create this image of perfection of who we think we're supposed to be in the world. And we learn that from parents, from church, from society, from our peers, all sorts of places. And so step one is, instead of constantly comparing ourselves to this perfect self, is to come back home, is to really come back and say, okay, I'm committing to get to know who I truly am, what's truly authentic for me. That's step one, and that brings awareness. So then we begin to become aware of, who is this being? We get curious. Instead of judging ourselves and comparing ourselves and being frustrated, like so many of us do, that we start to get like, okay, well, what do I like? What works for me? What doesn't work for me? What do I want more of in my life? What do I want less of in my life? And that all starts with becoming that willingness to say, I'm in, to commit to this being.
Yeah. And I've noticed that, especially with some of the women that I know, they have many hats. A lot of them have children, they're married, they have all these different roles they have to play. And then at the end of the day, it's like you said, finding your authentic self and finding your likes. A lot of times they don't know where those are and they don't have time for it. They think they don't have time for it. So how do you help somebody carve out that time and show them that can support them in their journey, like that actually that authentic part of themselves is valid and it will support them in a prosperous way where they know that it's real?
Yeah, and that's really the challenge, is that we've often been trained to put everybody else first. Mm-hmm. And that we're really versed at commitment, but we're committing to taking care of the kids, taking care of our partners, taking care of the job. And so it's, again, that willingness to recognize, and it's scary sometimes, that we need to put ourselves first. And that if we don't, what happens is that we get drained, we get resentful, we get frustrated, we feel empty, and we don't have anything to give. So it's only from coming back into our own center, and it's baby steps. So I hear this a lot from women, especially, of like, I don't know who I am. I don't even know what authentic is. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. And I always say, all you have to do is start to pay attention to what brings you a little bit of joy, or what opens your heart, or what lights you up. And that's the beginning of starting to follow what's true for you. And do more of what you love for you. Not what you think you should love, or what your partner loves, or what your kids want you to do, but actually, what do you love to do? And little baby steps. So I'll even teach women, like, just what color do you like? Start there. Or okay. What foods do you like? So sometimes it takes that really incremental building back up again to find our confidence. of like, oh, right, I do know. Okay, I like the color yellow. Yay! And I always say, then celebrate when you find a place that you're like, yes, okay, that is something that I like personally.
Yeah.
So,
And that will expand, won't it? When you put yourself into that experience, then you tend to expand that celebrative experience. But what about the guilt that comes up? Because I know some people say it's okay to have it good, but not too good. How do you deal with that?
yes, yes. Here's how I see it, is that whenever we want something in our lives, what we're doing is we're planting a seed in the universe. And so when we're committing to ourselves, if we want more love, if we're trying to find out what's authentic, we're saying to the universe, hey, I want to be more authentic, or hey, I want to be more of myself, or I want to love more. And two things happen, as I've seen it. The first thing is all the support and guidance and spiritual help starts to show up. And so all these synchronicities start happening to guide us. But there's something else that happens that we don't often know about, which is that all the obstacles also show up. Mm-hmm. And the obstacles are things like the guilt, or something happens that we get thrown off course. And instead of going, oh, right, I wanted to go there, here's the obstacle that needs to be cleaned up. Because every obstacle that arises, all it is an agreement or a belief that's stuck. And so if we can just step back and say, okay, what do I want? I'm committing to myself. I want to be more authentic. And then, oh, guilt is arising. Excellent. Guilt is what needs to be cleaned up. Mm. And that gives us, just by that awareness, it gives us a little bit extra space to step back and open and go, all right, guilt, you're on. Here we go. Let's start cleaning this up. And so if we can start then getting curious about, what am I guilty about? Where's the guilt coming from? Not trying to figure it out entirely. Like, you don't need to know where exactly it came from, but the willingness to start to question, where is this? What is this guilt? And to know that that will probably arise, or fear. And that doesn't mean anything's wrong. It actually means you're on the right track.
That's a big insight for me, because I'm glad you said that they both come up. You got your excitements, and then you also have your obstacles, that your agreements and beliefs, you said. Because what threw me off in the past is when I'd get excited and I'd start heading towards this path, and then those things would show up, the fear, the guilt, the shame, all these things. And then I'd say, gosh, am I doing the right thing? Because why is that here, Yes,
exactly. Yeah, and that throws most of us. The old pattern is either we're like, this is so awful, why is this happening? It's not fair, I don't deserve it. Or the obstacle arises and we're like, it's that person's fault. If only they hadn't put this obstacle in my way, I would be fine. So, yeah. or it comes up and we're like, oh, I didn't really want that anyway. So we get to see, what do we do with the obstacles? And that's huge. So do you give up immediately? Do you feel like go into grief? Like, what happens? And it's okay to have a reaction to it, but we want to watch what the reaction is with curiosity and with openness, because that's telling us something about ourselves. That's telling us something about the pattern we have of how we react to our obstacles. So for example, I know about myself that when I go to do something new and I get super excited about it and I'll throw myself into it, that what'll happen is about 3 days afterwards, I'll go into big self-doubt. And I know that's part of my matrix, that's part of my behavioral patterns. And so at first I would believe it, but now I'm like, okay, about 3 days self-doubt's going to show up, and it does. And I'm like, oh, hi, there's my self-doubt, how you doing? And so I have a different relationship with it now. I just know. I like that how you talked about curiosity and openness, because how you approached it is far different than the way that I used to approach it. I would approach it as like, oh no, this thing's here, I'm so angry. And that doesn't move the situation. That actually reinforces it, and it becomes a bigger enemy. So exactly. I like that relationship you've created with it's going to show up. So that's exciting. Yourself. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at an example in your life. Can you share an example of the transformation process with someone that's worked with you, or even yourself, that somebody could kind of insert themselves into the story and just kind of see how this transformation works? Yeah, absolutely. So let me see, do I want to use a story from someone or my own story?
You can even do both.
Or we can do both. That's true. That's always good. So
Yeah.
I'll start with myself. So I had an experience, it's been about 4 years now, where my beloved, my husband, my teaching partner moved out the same week that I had a brand new book come out. So I had this really intense change in my life. And through that process of going through the divorce and becoming single and losing my beloved, all this stuff that happened, I went through a process of, at first, a lot of grief, of course, and then really struggling with, like, how do I want to be with this? And I had people in my life at the time that were like, okay, HeatherAsh, like, you're the queen of change. So he's gone, just get over it and move on with your life. And I was like, okay, I should be able to do that, right? I'm a leader in my community. Everybody is looking up to me. I should just be able to go on.
Yeah.
And I felt into it, and I was like, this will be such a disservice to myself. I could feel it. Like, if I just pretend like everything's fine, I'm going to be dealing with this for a lot longer. And so I made the commitment to myself right there that I was going to stay with myself through the process, however long the process took and however messy it was. And that I was going to come out the other side loving more. That was my intent. And I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to stay with myself, and I wanted to come out the other side being able to be more in love with the world, with myself, with people. And so what happened then is I was able to then watch a bunch of choice points in my life where something would arise. And this is what happens with all of us in change, is that we make a decision around something and then we're given choice points over and over again. And so example, what happened with me is there was a moment where I was in my kitchen, I was really grieving, and I could see this choice of going into blame and going into a lot more pain, or starting to ask myself, what do you really want? And I heard this voice in my head that was like, sweetie, what do you really want? And I was like, that voice sounds really interesting. I'm going to go follow that voice.
Yeah.
And so I started asking myself, and it was such a good question. And this, we should definitely talk about this, is it's all about the questions you ask yourself. It really is. It's all about how you're asking the question and what the question is. And so this question was, what do you really want? And so I started listing it. And like what I could have done is I wanted to come back and I want this to all go away. And I was like, that's over. Like, what do you really want now? Like, there's nothing happening outside. What do you want inside? And so what I started naming was what I loved about my relationships. Like, I loved the peace. I loved the sweetness of the relationship. I love the communication. And so then I started saying, okay, sweetie, so how do you give that to yourself now? You want more peace? How do you give that to yourself? You want more love? How do you give that to yourself? And I ended up totally rearranging the house and clearing things and being a lot sweeter to myself. And it was beautiful. It was revolutionary because I came into a relationship with myself in the way that I wanted to be in relationship.
I love this because I'm very familiar with the divorce process, went through it myself.
Yes.
And I love your language because you're taking your power back, even in your words that you're communicating now, because you're asking yourself, how do I give this to myself? And it's so empowering. I really, really appreciate that, because some of these things are challenging. These emotions come up and it's hard to think straight sometimes because it's very powerful. Like you said, the grief process, and you were able to let go of that instead of clinging to yesterday. You were able to move forward. So I really like that a lot. I'll let you continue. Just keep going with that story. I just really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it took a long time. So it wasn't that the grief was then over and that I was fine. It was that now I had a focus. And so when the grief came up, I could be with the grief. When the loneliness came up, I could be with the loneliness and then talk myself through it. And so that place of the questions we ask ourselves, as you said, they either empower us by how we ask the question, or they can disempower us.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just the words, it's the energy. So I can say to myself, for example, why aren't you getting over this relationship? And there's this tone of punishment and you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, why aren't you getting over this relationship? And then there's this openness of like, I wonder why. What am I holding on to? And even when we have the right question, what we want to learn to do is live into the answer. Instead of I have to have the answer right now, of just let the question settle inside of us so that we're living the question and unraveling. Because what we're doing is we're unraveling old belief systems. And that takes time. Like my end of my relationship, the grief that I had wasn't just about the end of my relationship with my husband. It was around not being seen by my father. It was around all the times we had moved as a kid. And so I gave myself permission to grieve really heavily because I recognized I hadn't let myself grieve when I was young. And so there was a little backlog. And that also helped put it into context. And so I always tell this to people, 99% of the time, whatever is arising of a trigger in your life isn't about what's actually happening. If it's a big reaction, it's rarely about what's happening in the moment. It's something from the past that hasn't been cleared yet. So when we have that information, then we can, again, ask ourselves better questions. Okay, well, what's coming up to be cleared from the past? How can I be with myself? And what I've found is that the process can be intense while you're going through it, for sure. And coming out the other side, like, wow, I had so much more spaciousness and presence and love through the journey. So that's...
Yeah. I like that you said, how can I be with myself, as opposed to how can I, drink myself into a coma or take some drugs or run away from this.
Yeah. How do I get over this as fast as possible? And that makes it worse in the long term. Yeah. And I think about the difference between short-term game and long-term game. So short-term game is what we're super familiar with in this culture. Short-term game is I'm going to feel better right away. And that's I'm going to eat, I'm going to drink, I'm going to go get into another relationship, like whatever it is in whatever situation. I'm going to numb out. And it feels better in the short term, but in the long term, it's detrimental because it doesn't go away. We're just burying it. And I think about it, it's like we're holding a beach ball underwater. And whenever you hold something underwater, it goes under pressure. The moment you take your attention off of it, it's going to come hit you in the face or hit someone you love in the face. Like it's going to blow up somewhere down the line. So that willingness to step towards the discomfort. And in my community, we have a saying, which is discomfort is the new black. Because it's that willingness to go towards the discomfort rather than away from it. Because when we go towards our discomfort, when we stay with ourselves, when we don't think about it, but just let ourselves feel it and be present, then in the long run, there's healing. It might be comfortable in the short run, but if we can just stay with it, we know that the healing in the long run will be beautiful.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I just watched a movie called the Doctor Strange last night. It's a movie that's out right now. Yes. And in the movie, the doctor that had all this knowledge, he went to go see the Ancient One because his knowledge wasn't working for him. And one thing she said in the movie was similar to what you're saying. It's about embracing, that darkness, and then it turns into your power. And exactly. I think you're describing that and how to do it in real life, which is really kind of synchronistic for me because I'm in the same spot that you're describing, and I'm with you, and this is fantastic. And I can really tell you've done a lot of work on yourself, and you really know what you're communicating because it works. So let's look at a big scale, and let's say everything that's happening in the world right now with, we talked about, you read in your blog about the fears that we have. So let's talk about some of these big fears that people are feeling right now, and what are some of the key things that they can do to get over some of these, because this whole divide thing is really awful. So what can we do? Yeah.
So, we're in a society right now, we're in a culture that there's a lot of duality, and we're seeing it especially at this time of the election and what's been going on. And so what happens whenever we're in a big change is people's fears get stimulated. And so when I was sitting with it a couple days ago and I woke up just like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on inside of me. What I've learned to do, and what I really support people in doing, is instead of pretending like we're not afraid, to name the fear, because naming it gives it less power. And we think, well, if I don't name it, then I'm not giving it power. But it's actually the opposite. When we keep things buried, and I see this with people that are on healing paths or transformational paths or spiritual paths, sometimes there's a belief of, I just have to pretend like everything's fine.
Yeah.
And that is what will, like, I have to keep my vibration high all the time. And that's true, except when we're triggered. And for me, what I found is we first have to clean that. We have to own it. We have to love it. So I've learned when I go into fear or vulnerability to name the vulnerability, to name the fear. And so in that blog that you're referencing to, I just wrote out, like, what am I afraid of? And let myself go and let myself feel the fear. And then once I got through the fears, and this is super helpful for us, is the willingness to write out the fear or speak it to someone who's neutral, that can just go, yep, I hear you, I'm with you. That then takes some of the power away, and that we then can let ourselves feel it and then go, okay, so what do I want?
Okay.
Where do I want to put my attention? And that we then redirect and say, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's possible here?
Yeah.
And for some people, like working with the fears, it might take an hour, it may take a few days, it may take a week. You know, all of it's good. Took me about, I don't know, I'm still in it. It's going to take a couple of days.
Yeah.
But that willingness to stay with it and to keep listening and to then open to, what do I want? So the recognition, this place of taking back power again, is to realize nobody else has power over this moment for me. I get to choose how I want to be in this moment. And so then I can go back to, where do I want to put my attention? And as I think about it, we're voting with every action. So every action we take has huge impact on us and on the world around us. So then I come back to, how do I want to be in the world? Instead of saying, this person should make the world this way, I get to come back and say, what do I want to create? And let me create that in my family, in my community, inside of myself, bigger and bigger circles.
Yeah. Yeah, I really pay attention to words a lot, and I like the words you're using, because you said choose how I want to be. Like, you become the solution. And it sounds like you're really mastering the inner game, which is giving you all the power. Because there's what's going on the outside world, and we're all kind of collectively seeing it. But you're taking that, you're naming it, exposing it, and then changing that focus and that perspective in the moment and putting your power right back inside of you. And that is really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a good thing. And I think about it as like we're embracing our fears.
Yeah.
So fear is here. I'm going to embrace it, and then I'm going to put my attention on where I'm going. And that helps. It does help. It's we have to learn how to do it though. So again, baby steps. So what I always really remind people is that it's really familiar for many of us to judge ourselves, to beat ourselves up, to compare ourselves. And so please don't let your mind go, well, I should be just getting over this fear now because I've named it.
Right.
I shouldn't have fear, or I don't know what to focus on, I'm a bad human. To just keep coming back to, change takes time, and learning how to support ourselves and be positive and look at best case scenarios and hold our fear, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So baby steps.
I like that.
Steps.
Yeah, because change, we're an instant gratification culture. You know, the reason why I have an Americano, because I want to feel different now. But unfortunately, the big things, like you said, we have to shift, and we have to kind of let it, you know, alchemize itself, so to speak, with our attention and focus and perspective and attitude, all these good things. So let's talk about, how do people get together? And first of all, where do we find you? Where's your website?
I have a couple websites. First one is HeatherAshAmara.com.
Okay.
And that has a bunch of videos and all the events of what I'm up to. And then the second one is warriorgoddess.com. They're connected, so you can go to either one and you'll find the other.
Nice. So do you have retreats available one-on-one? How do you prefer to work with people?
I love doing workshops. So we have Warrior Goddess workshops around the country. I also take people on retreats to Mexico and Peru because I found it super helpful for us to get out of our dream, the way that we've been living our lives, to go someplace that's unique and that has a lot of energy, and to work with a group of people. You can create huge transformation in actually a really short amount of time, working with a group of people that have the same focus and intent. So I'm really big on community. Like, let's get together and support each other, which is really, really so important, especially during these times. So those are the two main things that I do. I also have some online apprenticeship programs. So the next one will start next March, which is a 9-month program of walking people through the different steps that are in Warrior Goddess training. So I love doing online as well, because I know there's people in middle of nowhere that need community as well. So we're blessed to have this forum to be able to reach out to people.
Well, this is great. And I'm getting a little feedback. I don't know if you're getting that too, but what we can talk about now is step one. If I want to work with you, I know there's a ramping up process. What is the step one if I want to get, do I buy your book? Or which is the first step that you want me to take?
Good question. So first thing, the book would be great. And so I have 4 books out. So Toltec Path of Transformation is for everyone. So that's a great place to start. Warrior Goddess Training is the beginning book. So again, I feel anybody can read it. But for the women that read that book, I also have an 11-day online boot camp. And what it is it's 11 different videos over 11 days and different practices to do. So it's really engaging. And those start the first Tuesday of every month.
Okay.
And that's a great way to plug in. And then just to look at, okay, what's next? The book that just came out is called Warrior Goddess Way. So that's the next level of the teachings.
Okay.
Which really goes more deeply into forgiveness, relationships, death, how to say yes to everything, how to tap into your wisdom, and how to reconnect with your authenticity.
Very nice.
The next step.
Yeah, and I'm big on the community too. I know that we all need to have a tribe. We need to feel like we belong and that we're validated and supported. And I remember reading the book Mind Over Medicine by Dr. Elise Rankin, and she talked about the difference between people who had these, illnesses, whether they recovered or not. One of the main key differences is whether they felt supported in their community.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
I totally believe that. Yeah.
Powerful.
Beautiful.
Well, all right. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on, and I hope we can do this again. And I am definitely going to send people your way because I am going to read the books myself. I'm very interested. So
good. Well, and thank you so much for all that you're doing and for holding this forum. It was really delightful to meet you. And
all right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week. Take care, HeatherAsh.
Thank you.